Welcome to the Financial Times in Mumbai. We're sitting down to talk this afternoon with Anand Mahindra, Vice Chairman and Managing Director of Mahindra Group, one of India's largest diversified automakers, but also a company which under Mr. Mahindra's leadership this year overtook John Deere to become the world's largest tractor manufacturer. We're here to talk about innovation and in particular Mr. Mahindra's view that Indian companies need to up their game and no longer rely on frugal concepts of innovation, but instead begin to take on the world's best. Mr. Mahindra, thank you very much for joining us. So you've been on record as criticizing Indian approaches to innovation for relying too much on frugality and not doing enough of their own innovation. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, what I've been critical of is that we seem to be getting stuck on a particular model that was very appropriate at a particular stage in development. And that was called jugaad, which is a local phrase meaning you make do, or you can do with the resources you have. And that served us very well when we indeed were painfully short of resources and we just had to cobble together debris to create machinery and to survive. But as India has grown, and as the Indian consumer is demanding more and more sophistication from the products and services they buy, my only contention is that we need to move beyond jugaad. And we need to move to a concept of giving more for less. So I still think India is not meant to simply move out and provide cutting edge technology at the same cost levels that the rest of our global competitors do. Our differentiation point will be doing more for less. Now, to that extent, frugal engineering is not a phrase I quarrel with. It's the other phrase that I quarrel with. Frugal engineering, if it means giving more for less, then I have no argument.
So do you think that Indian companies really can compete on the world scale in the way that you managed to become the world's largest tractor player? Can others follow that path? Is that a realistic ambition?
I would hope so. I would like to think they can, because certainly we don't think we are supermen or superwomen and that we have some special features that other Indian companies don't. I really think they can. It has to do with hunger. It has to do with a desire to succeed, to finally let out the genies that were kept under lock and key for many, many years under the controlled economy here. So it's about animal spirits that Indian companies have. They manifest themselves in different ways, but I hope they all lead to a place on the winner's podium.
So speaking about companies in the West, should companies outside of India and China and other emerging markets be looking here to see what they can learn about the way that companies are innovating in these economies?
I have an openly professed and very strong skepticism about theories that say there's some je ne sais quoi about Indian innovation which has to be emulated and which you can learn from, or an Indian way. That's become a very hot topic these days. Is there some Indian management system or Indian way of innovation? I don't really believe that. I think there are ways of just being committed to doing more for less, which will allow you to do it, and frankly to any company in the world. I think Indian companies are better at doing it, are more accustomed to do it, but it doesn't mean it's something nobody can do. And to be very honest, what was Silicon Valley innovation about? It was about garage innovation. It was about innovation via constraints. If you go to Silicon Valley and you ask any PE or VC, what kind of company does he invest in? He says he looks for companies that haven't thrown too many resources at the problem, be they people or money. And they feel simply that kind of constraint-led innovation is what leads to success. So arguably, maybe we've just gotten better at doing what parts of the West were doing in any case. And maybe the West has simply forgotten how to do that.
So you were talking about constraints, and one of the constraints that Indian companies are facing at the moment is the macro economy and its policy environment, where the government is accused of being paralyzed and growth is declining. What do you think needs to happen to break out of this cycle and get India growing again?
The Indian economy is one that will always have this label of never living up to its full potential, because there are a zillion ways in which any Indian citizen, any talkative Indian citizen, which we are naturally, will tell you what the government could do better, or what would happen if certain regulations were put in place or removed entirely. And that's not untrue. there is always going to be a wistfulness about Indian businessmen saying, if only that wasn't there, we'd be 2x as opposed to what we're doing now. But that said, the fact is that India continues to show a growth rate which is healthy despite all its problems. The almost inbuilt rate, inbuilt growth rate which we have is a healthy one and an attractive one to investors around the world. So even the worst, the most pessimistic forecast now comes out with a 6.1% growth rate in GDP for calendar year 2012. I think that's an attractive one for most people. You will always find Indians saying, if only this was to happen, if we had better governance, if we had a more coherent political system in place, we would be a 9. And that's true. And perhaps we will get there eventually. What I find is happening is that every year, the inertia in the system, and I mean that in the positive sense, inertia towards growth, it gets moved to a higher threshold level. Maybe it's due to aspirations of consumers, the impatience of consumers and citizens today, but I think India is perhaps imperceptibly but gradually notching up to levels of growth which will surprise everyone.
So thank you very much for that. Well, let's conclude the interview with our long and short segment. So let me just throw a few words at you, and if you give us your response, long or short. You're known for being a fanatical user of Twitter, so business people on Twitter.
Long.
And the rupee?
Long.
The euro?
Short.
Electric cars?
Long.
And petrol-powered cars?
Short.
Mr. Mahindra, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us this afternoon. This has been the Financial Times in Mumbai.